Iran just struck a major U.S. airbase. 26 troops wounded, Marines rushing in, and the Pentagon has no clear plan. What happens next could shock the world. This is not a drill. This is not a warning shot. This is an active war, 1 month in, and it is getting more dangerous by the hour. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you will understand exactly how close the Middle East is to the edge right now. 1 month ago, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iranian targets. The stated goal was straightforward: force Iran to limit its nuclear program, get Tehran to the negotiating table, make the cost too high to keep pushing. Iran had a different idea entirely. Iran didn't back down. They struck back, systematically, methodically. Now, directly at US troops inside Saudi Arabia. And nobody in Washington saw the full scale of Friday's attack coming. Picture this: 6 ballistic missiles and 29 drones screaming toward Prince Sultan Air Base. Alarms blaring across the compound. Air defense systems firing in every direction. Explosions lighting up the Saudi night sky. This is not some remote desert outpost. Prince Sultan Air Base sits just 60 miles from Riyadh, the Saudi capital. The Royal Saudi Air Force runs it, but hundreds of American troops are stationed there. It is a critical hub for U.S. operations across the entire region. U.S. air defenses intercepted most of the incoming fire, but not all. And what got through is shocking. At least 2 missiles and 1 drone punched through the defensive screen. 26 American soldiers were hurt in a single strike. One moment they were on routine duty. The next, they were fighting for their lives. Most reported traumatic brain injuries. 2 were seriously wounded. But the human cost was not even the most alarming part of what Iran just destroyed. There was a plane sitting on that base. A Boeing E-3 Sentry, an AWACS aircraft. Think of it as a flying radar station, capable of tracking aircraft and missiles across hundreds of miles, feeding commanders a real-time picture of the entire battlefield from the air. Nobody expected Iran to hit this target specifically, and this one strike just exposed a massive blind spot in American military capability. The US had only 16 of these aircraft in operational condition before Friday's attack. There is no quick replacement waiting in a GD car somewhere. The closest substitute, the E-7 Wedgetail, cost $700 million per aircraft and would take years to produce and deploy. That is not just a damaged plane. That is a serious, costly, irreplaceable hole in American eyes and ears over the most active war zone on the planet right now. And here is where it gets even more alarming. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky came forward and said he was 100% confident that Russia provided Iran with satellite imagery of Prince Sultan Air Base in the days leading up to the strike. Russian satellites photographed the base on March 20th, March 23rd, and March 25th. 3 sweeps in 5 days. Zelensky broke down the pattern plainly. 1 image means preparation. 2 means simulation. 3 means an attack is coming within 48 hours. The strike hit on March 28th. Draw your own conclusions. Now step back and look at the full picture of this week alone. Friday's strike was not the first time Iran targeted Prince Sultan this week. It was the 3rd. Earlier attacks in the same 7-day window injured 14 more US troops and damaged several refueling aircraft. In one of those earlier incidents, no casualties were reported, but a US aircraft was still damaged. Iran hit the same base 3 times in 1 week, and each strike was worse than the last. The total number of American service members wounded since this war began has now passed 300. 13 Americans have been killed in action. One of them, Army Sergeant Benjamin Pennington, was just 26 years old. He was wounded at this same base in EGDK March and died days later. These numbers are not slowing down, and the question being asked inside the Pentagon right now is not whether Iran will strike again. It is where and when. So America isn't sitting idle, but what they're doing next could change the entire war, and not everyone is ready for it. The USS Tripoli, an amphibious assault ship normally based in Japan, was conducting exercises near Taiwan 2 weeks ago when the order came through: redirect immediately to the Middle East. The ship arrived in the operational zone on March 27th, carrying 2,500 Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, along with F-35B strike fighters, transport aircraft, and amphibious assault assets ready for action. And that is just the beginning of what is moving into position. The USS Boxer left San Diego on March 18th, carrying another 2,500 Marines. The Army's 82nd Airborne is sending at least 1,000 soldiers to the region. The Pentagon is reportedly evaluating a deployment of an additional 10,000 ground troops. If approved, total U.S. ground forces positioned near Iran would exceed 17,000. Before any of this latest surge, the U.S. already had its largest military presence in the Middle East in over 20 years. 2 aircraft carriers, dozens of warships, roughly 50,000 troops spread across the region. Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly said the U.S. can achieve its objectives without ground troops. But in the same breath, he said Trump must be prepared for multiple contingencies, and that forces are positioned to give the president maximum options. That is not reassurance. That is preparation. Trump himself has been impossible to ignore throughout all of this. At a Saudi investment forum on March 28th, he spoke candidly about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. He claimed MBS had underestimated him.
That the Crown Prince assumed America was in decline and another weak president would roll through. But now the calculation had completely changed.
The remarks were unfiltered, even by Trump's usual standards. But underneath the bravado is a real geopolitical tension that cannot be ignored. Saudi Arabia is caught in an extraordinarily difficult position. It is hosting U.S. troops that keep getting hit. Its oil infrastructure is under attack. A drone last week struck a refinery in Yanbu on the Red Sea coast. Iran is now signaling it can threaten Saudi Arabia's Red Sea export route, not just the Strait of Hormuz. Here is why that is so significant. Saudi Arabia has a pipeline that moves its oil exports to the Red Sea, bypassing Iran's stranglehold on the Hormuz Strait. That buffer gave Riyadh an advantage its neighbors did not have. The UAE's exports have been almost entirely blocked. But with Yanbu now under fire, even that lifeline is in danger. Riyadh has reportedly been pressing the U.S. to intensify its strikes on Iran, calling this a historic opportunity to reshape the Middle East. But Saudi Arabia has not officially sent its military into the fight. And analysts say that decision hinges entirely on whether diplomacy has any hope left. And just when this could not expand any further, Yemen entered the war. The Houthis launched ballistic missiles toward Israel on Saturday, their first direct strike in the broader conflict. They framed it as retaliation for Israeli airstrikes the day before, which hit 2 of Iran's largest steel factories, a power plant, and civilian nuclear sites inside Iran. Israel confirmed detecting an incoming missile from Yemeni territory. The Houthis said strikes would continue until the aggression ends. Think carefully about what that means. A conflict that began as a targeted U.S.-Israeli operation against Iran has now spread across the region. Kuwait took drone strikes on an airport, damaging radar systems. Oman was hit at the port of Salalah. In Abu Dhabi, debris from an intercepted missile injured 6 people. Lebanon saw Israeli airstrikes on southern territory, with Hezbollah firing back. This is no longer a contained operation. It is a regional war, with new fronts opening almost daily. Since February 28th, the U.S. has launched thousands of strikes, destroyed hundreds of Iranian naval vessels, and flown over 11,000 combat missions. The scale is staggering. And yet, Iran has not broken. Its grip on the Strait of Hormuz remains tight. Global oil markets are rattled. Air travel across the region is severely disrupted. Trump has given Iran until April 6th to reopen the strait. Iran says no negotiations are even happening. That is 9 days, no framework, and 2 sides describing completely different realities. What fills that gap is the defining question of this moment. Here is where everything stands. American troops are being hit repeatedly in Saudi Arabia. Marines and paratroopers are converging on the region from multiple directions. A critical surveillance aircraft is destroyed, with no replacement in sight. Russia appears to be quietly feeding Iran the intelligence to target U.S. forces. The Houthis have fired their first shots in the broader war, and a U.S. deadline expires in 9 days with 0 confirmed diplomatic contact. Every decision made in the next 2 weeks carries consequences that extend far beyond the Middle East. A ground operation would be an escalation with no clear endpoint. Standing back lets Iran keep hitting US assets and testing every red line. And diplomacy is being conducted in a vacuum. This could spiral into a regional war that reshapes the entire Middle East. Or it could pull back from the edge at the last possible moment. What do you think actually happens next? Comment below. And subscribe now, because the next few weeks will decide the fate of the Middle East, and you need to be here when it unfolds.